Good morning, YouTube. Warble's on a lot here. Let's see if we've got first dog on the moon today.
Media is totally democratized platforms. You can put anything up on social media.
I think that's a really interesting point. I mean, and Benson, we're at this point now where there's a lot of access, where the power dynamic is being changed tremendously in terms of who can get access to an audience, who can make an argument.
Well, there is a fair bit around the online profile, but then also the anonymity of being able to comment and put your ideas across, but then have no association or take no responsibility for actually what you're fueling. And so we see that in the rise of bullying online. We see it from trolls online. That the people that are wanting to have this discussion, that are putting it out there, it's easier to shoot down than actually to lift up and have the conversation in 140 characters.
And it's almost a shame that the case of Germaine Greer and her no platform incidents around transgender issues sort of come to mind. I mean, it's almost as if the people who were powerless in conversations are now using a sudden new access to power in conversation to close down that conversation rather than engage more actively in the conversation. That doesn't seem helpful.
No, I think it's very dangerous. I think it's very dangerous. I mean, if we're not able to talk about things, then we're not going to resolve things. And then also, you know, the loudest and, as you said, the most anonymous. You know, I mean, things can go out there and you can't take them back. You know, in the old days there was corrections in newspapers. Even if people didn't read them, there was some sense of some accounting or some sense of, you know, on the record. This is just, it goes out there and that's it. Cut and paste.
How wonderful not to have a conversation about Sam Dastiari, though. I mean, that's a positive. You know, I think
well, except for Sam, of course. I'm sure he's very annoyed. You'll be getting a tweet soon.
Yes, we're heading into another week of politics. I was going to ask you all to sort of try and nominate an achievement of the first year of the Turnbull government. You could have a stab at that, couldn't you, Sinclair?
Well, I got into a lot of trouble because I was on the AFR list of experts asked about this, and I said, well, he did win the election, and he did get rid of Mr. Abbott, which caused a lot of my right-wing troll friends to go onto social media and abuse me no end. But I think winning an election is never a non-trivial event, and I do believe that Mr. Abbott was going to struggle to win that election. So I think winning the election is...
Benson, how do you think Mr. Turnbull is going? 1 year.
I think he's going all right. I think he is.
This is really stupid. Dizzy's Joey keeps trying to get into Mrs. Dogface's pouch, even though Dizzy is right there. There's Dizzy on the other side of the swimming pool. The Joey is now back with her mother, but she just went bananas and got herself kicked in the head trying to get into Mrs. Dogface's pouch over there after spending a couple of minutes running backwards and forwards, calling for Mum when Mum was over there all the time. That's kind of weird. Anyway, moving right along.
And Seamus Murphy.
Yep, they've finished their day's activities and they're not going to give us a first dog on the moon, and that's really annoying, upsetting. Nothing I can do about it though. Life's like that. I finally saw the features of that Sam Dastiari that they're not going to talk about. He's really young. He doesn't look like he's even as old as 30. So that means he probably is 30 or 35. He's got jet black hair, and he looks as if he's the long-lost secret love child of Richard Torbay over the top of Mr. Bean. Now, that English comedian, yeah, that's what Sam Dastiari looks like. And the cleverest, most telegrammatic encapsulation of Sam Dastiari and what he's done, which for those of you who've been hiding under a rock, he owed the Australian government $1,600 and something. He approached a Sydney educational company owned by Chinese individuals with deep connections back to the Chinese government. So basically he asked the Chinese government if they would pretty please like to pay the $1,600 that he personally owed the Australian Federal Commonwealth in travelling costs. The Chinese educational company said, yeah, no worries, we'd love to do that. And they paid the money. And then he declared that he had that expense covered by those businessmen, and he realised that it was going to look really horrible, and then he admitted it, and he gave an equal amount of money to an unnamed charity. And then I think it was Corey Bernardi actually detected this, because they're both senators, so they get access to each other's declared pecuniary interests lists. He noticed it, and the media went off. And eventually, after a week of saying, yeah, but you know, it wasn't against the rules, and he's paid the money back, and he knows he's done the wrong thing, finally this character resigned. And what he essentially did was he threw Malcolm Turnbull a lifeline, because Malcolm Turnbull would otherwise have spent the last week explaining how he came to lose control of the House of Representatives because about 5 of his MPs decided to take an early mark on the last day of Parliament. Right. So the whole week was spent talking about Sam Dostiari, and the most brilliant encapsulation of it was to call him Dim Sam. Now, considering that a dim sim is an alleged item of Chinese culinary construction, which apparently originated in Australian Chinese restaurants in the 1930s. That's what a dim sim is. And here we have a Dim Sam who was too bloody stupid to realise that it's a really bad idea to ask a foreign government with whom one's nation is currently engaged in going toe-to-toe with freedom of navigation exercises in the Spratly Islands, to get them to pay your travelling expenses immediately before you address a bunch of them in China, and you tell them for their newspapers to broadcast that you think Australia should butt out of the Spratly Islands and it's nothing to do with America Island, and, you know, South China Sea is for China to decide over, which I think is perfectly good, sensible thing to say. But you have to have absolutely squeaky clean hands and records before you say it. You can't accept money from a foreign power and then go out to champion the foreign power's view of military policy against your own country. I mean, that's just Dim Sam. It's like some dumb prick, you know, SUMDUMPRIK. Dim Sam. Very Dim Sam. And sadly, it means that pretty much from now on, anybody who says anything sensible on the issue of the South China Sea is probably going to get accused of being as dim as Sam, because we're all supposed to support Uncle Spam. Yeah, which, you know, Uncle Spam, that kind of brings me to the other unignorable event, which is that today is the 11th of September 2016. So it's 15 years since somebody managed to hijack 4 airliners. And after they were hijacked, apparently by 19 failing student pilots who weren't good enough to be able to take off and land in a 2-seat Cessna, after that, 2 of these airliners conducted a high-speed precision-powered spiral dive, which is an extraordinarily difficult manoeuvre to pull off, you know. I mean, essentially, it's an expanded version of what aircraft carrier pilots do when they land the American way off a curving approach. Is it the British way? Yeah, the British way off a curving approach, yep. The Americans come in dead straight line under control of the batsman and then plop it on. It's very, very difficult to actually arrive at a designated spot off a descending powered spiral dive. It's not the sort of thing that your average pilot could do. It's the sort of thing that a really good pilot would have to practice several times. The idea that a couple of bunch of student pilots did that twice in succession, that is beyond my ability to easily believe, but that's the official story. Then the idea that because 2 aeroplanes hit 2 buildings 3 buildings caught alight and fell down because of the fires. Steel reinforced concrete skyscrapers. And they all descended neatly, vertically at freefall speed, just the same speed as if you dropped a brick from a helicopter level with their roof and filmed that. That's how fast they went down there. No internal resistance at all. 3 buildings. And they landed in their own footprint area. Very neat, very neat. I find that a completely unreconcilable chain of events. You know, 2 aeroplanes hitting 2 buildings doesn't cause any fucking buildings to fall down, not when the buildings are steel reinforced concrete skyscrapers. It certainly doesn't cause 3 to fall down, one of them allegedly because there was burning office furniture on the ground floor. I mean, just piss off. I'm not that stupid. Then there's a story about how a hole in the ground that had no aircraft wreckage is where a third hijacked airliner ploughed into the ground because the passengers overcame the flight deck. But there's no bloody aircraft wreckage there. It was just a hole in the ground, like a trench. No wingtips, no tail, no fins, no engines, no control surfaces, no seats. No. And something hit the Pentagon. Like an aeroplane was seen to fly low over the Pentagon, and everybody who submitted their mobile phone cameras and videos and everything, that all got confiscated. And the story is that a twin-engined, low-wing aeroplane with jet engines, turbofans hanging underneath the wings on pylons, this aeroplane is supposed to have gone straight across the road, straight across the lawn. It's apparently miraculously gone straight through light posts without knocking them down. Then it's tracked across the lawn low enough for the pointy end at the front of the fuselage to go in through one of the windows in the outer ring of offices of the Pentagon. And there are photos still available that show before the roof, you know, the top of the hole collapsed down into the hole and left a U-shaped hole in the Pentagon wall. There was actually at one point a sort of a 15-foot, maybe 20-foot diameter hole. So something actually hit the Pentagon and went in and blew up, and it detonated pretty much in the first office and left a shower of debris. But there were no trenches cut in the lawn by the 10-foot diameter turbofans underneath the wings as the aeroplane came down low enough for the low-winged aeroplane to get its nose into the fucking window. So the best guess there is that, I think called an RB-47 dropped a air-to-ground missile. And the missile went into that office. Because the office that was hit, that was the office that was investigating where about a missing $3 billion or $3.5 billion disappeared to. And I'm pretty sure that money was spent on developing satellite-linked drone control systems so you can fly your radio-controlled unmanned aircraft anywhere in the world from an office underground Cheyenne Mountain. So that's what actually happened. And on the day, the bullshit started pretty early. They were telling us within minutes of it happening that 10,000 people were, in the 2 buildings, and that turned out to be 3,500 who got killed, and half of them, well, not half of them, but a big number of them were firefighters who were running upstairs, like against the flow, trying to get there. And yeah, well, the really crazy thing is that not long after the September 11 attack or kamikaze phenomenon, a 747 which had hydraulic fluid leaking onto its tail, weakening the structure, pilot pushed full right rudder on that thing and the whole tail fin fell off, and that crashed on a block of flats which was pretty much full of firefighters and police and their families, and it was kind of like the relatives of the firefighters and police who were killed in the Twin Towers. They all got killed when an aeroplane fell on their bloody housing apartment. Very weird, very weird. I don't know what happened 15 years ago today, but it sure did change the world. They're right about that. We're now in the forever war, the war against terrorism. And terrorism was a word invented by Joseph Goebbels in 1942 to describe the Royal Air Force area bombing of dormitory suburbs of German cities. And that's the truth. That's the truth. He called them terrorfliegeren. Next people to be called terrorists were the Israelis by the British-mandated Authority in Palestine. We're on the upload limit. Warble's on a lot to YouTube. Happy 11 September Day. Ciao.